So I'm here with director Oliver Hodge, who is the director of Garbage Warrior, which is playing as part of CineCity. And Garbage Warrior takes a look at eco-architect Michael Reynolds and his struggle to change legislation to allow him to build these environmentally sustainable shelters and dwellings. So welcome to the CineCity podcast, Ollie.
Thanks.
I haven't had a chance to see the film yet, so would you be able to just quickly take us through what the film is about?
Yeah, Garbage Warrior follows the life story of radical eco-architect Michael Reynolds, who's been building communities out in the deserts of New Mexico and all around the world of sustainable ways of life and sustainable buildings. And the story really follows him and his problems with the law and how he has to try and change the law and how he ends up taking on the whole of the American legislation system to try and change laws to allow for easier testing of sustainable and radically different ways of life, of living, ways of living that really break all planning and building and health and safety regulations. And he believes the regulations restrict our chances to evolve. So he gets himself into some pretty hairy battles with the authorities. He gets his community shut down. But the story does take us on his global journey through India after the tsunami and to Mexico as well. So it's a real international story.
Mm-hmm. I know that you've been involved with film, not directly as a director, for many years now after graduating from St. Martin's. Was it that you were looking to direct, or was it just that you came across this story and it was too good? That was what kind of made you think about going into directing?
I was interested in doing my own film, so I was looking for something to do, but I think finding this character really pushed that way quicker than it was going to happen. I mean, I actually gave up a job on a film to go and follow Mike, and get this documentary off the ground. And I was getting pretty well paid at the time. So I think he did inspire me. It kicked my arse into gear to get a film made, and it's taken a long time, but these things do, Mm-hmm.
Basically, you found the story and you went off and followed Mike. So at that point, I'm presuming you had no funding in place.
Had no funding in place. I'd earned some money from working on other movies and used that money to get the thing going. And we did get some money from the UK Film Council to keep us going, to get us to the next stage where we could pitch in the film festivals around the world to try and get more money from broadcasters, which we did in the end. But I was 3/4 of the way into the film. I'd pretty much shot the whole movie before we really got any money. We got promises of money, but before we really knew we were going to get it, I'd pretty much almost shot the movie. So it just shows you, you've got to be mad really, but that's one way of doing it. But the huge amount of the cost of making a film is in the post-production anyway. Mm-hmm. The editing and the post-production, and then converting it to film, which we had to do, which is great we had to do it, but it's £40,000-50,000 with all the other deliverables. Mm-hmm. That's just for the conversion to film, let alone the cost of grading and online editing and just offline editing, just putting the story together as well. It's a lot of work. So the majority of the cost of our project was actually in post-production, probably.
Yeah. Talking about post-production, I know that you put together a rough cut of the film and then you showed that rough cut to Michael, who then commented on it, which you then cut back into the film. And so you kind of got almost a recycling thing going on in the production there. Why did you do that as opposed to, I suppose, what might have been the more traditional approach of getting a voiceover person to say, now Michael's doing this? Why did you go that route?
Well, one, I wanted it to be a personal story and a movie as well. And I know some movies have voiceover, but it's normally one of the characters telling their story, like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption. Yeah. He's telling a story, but he's one of the main characters in the film, so they can get away with it. It makes it a hell of a lot easier to tell a story. We didn't want the voice of God or a third-person narrator, because who the hell is this person? It's very TV, that. It does work in some films. It just wasn't going to work for us. I really wanted to create a movie. So I thought the only person that's going to be able to tell the story is Michael himself. It's his story. But I'd never get him to do voiceover and narration. I couldn't have written for him. He's just not one of those people that's... he's not an actor. He's a real person, and you've got to be a bit of an actor to really pull off a good narration. You've got to be able to express it in its full meaning, and to do that, you've really got to act it out, you know. And I've given him stuff to read before, and it just dies. It's just no disrespect to him, but he can't do it, and I knew that right from the beginning. So we had to trick him into saying what we wanted him to say or react in a genuine reaction. So what better way than to shoot the movie and then actually put a rough cut together, get it onto a laptop, onto an editing program or whatever, and play it back to the man and film him while he's watching it, and just stop the film and ask him how he feels about it, or ask him to explain what the hell's going on there. And you're getting a genuine reaction of excitement or depression, or, you know, it's a general emotional reaction, because he's taking himself back into the last 30 years of his life, or the last 4 years of his life, and some pretty frustrating moments. So, and also we took him back to the tsunami in the same way, by showing him how hard they had to work out after the tsunami to help these people out in the Andaman Islands. And it was a great way. It really does work. And I did 3 different interviews with him. The same thing. I played the film out in front of him and kept pressing stop. And then we re-edited that voiceover, as you call it, or narrative, retrospective interview, really, back into the film. So we used snippets of it to push the story. And it actually really helped. I mean, I knew I was going to have to do it, but I had a great editor working with me, Phil Reynolds, who's also from Brighton. He helped me, because he's an experienced editor, he helped me say, you know, if you don't get him to say this, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get to the next stage of the story. So I'm like, how am I going to get him to say that spontaneously? So, you know, you have to think of ways of getting him to say it, or ways of stopping the film at the right point and asking a particular question. And he's either going to say it or he doesn't, but generally it did work. It was a great way of doing it. I'd use it again.
You imagine documentaries are just all about sitting back and letting everything happen, but it sounds almost like the approach or the various techniques that a director might use on a fiction film when they're trying to get a particular performance out of an actor.
It's true, actually. These documentaries that sit back and watch, these real observational documentaries, I don't know whether it's because they're shot over a shorter time, or maybe they're shot over a long time. I don't know. But whatever it is, our story was not an easy story to tell. It was because it was complicated to differentiate. The audience had to understand why he needed to change the law. If they didn't understand that, the whole of the rest of the film was lost on them. So that was the really tricky bit, is getting them to realise, even after he'd had his communities opened again by the law, he still needed to change the law. And there was a very fine difference that he needed, that extra little bit. They really needed to understand that. But we didn't truly understand that until we actually started editing. You know, we had a scheduled break in the edit to go back and shoot a retrospective interview and anything else that we thought collectively that is going to help the film. And there was actually a lot of stuff. I had 2 weeks to do it. So in a way we were structuring the story a little bit. We weren't structuring the story, but we were structuring the parts of the truth that we needed to get and assemble to make the story that we wanted to tell, rather than just, you know, sitting there and filming anything and letting it be an observational. I think I've done that kind of stuff before, where you can. In the tsunami, it was a lot easier just to observe, because what was going on was telling itself, and it was live as well, which is, when you're filming something live, it's a lot easier. When you're filming a retrospective story, you have to construct it, really. You have to work it out. You're still telling what happened, but you've got to get people to reenact it or tell it how it was, tell you what happened, and then you edit that together with footage and liven it up and make it more dramatic. But if it's happening live in front of you, you don't need to do anything, because it's actually happening. You just got to shoot a hell of a lot of stuff and edit well, and also choose well what you shoot. So if you want, like, to film that guy who lost his house and everything, friends and all of that in the tsunami, I chose to get him to take me to his house, which was a pile of rubble on the ground. But it was a powerful thing that I needed in the film to make the audience realise how bad it was. And also we needed someone's personal story in there to build up the emotions And also the tsunami in the film was a little story within a bigger story, because at the end you see that guy smiling. You see that the experience of building one of these buildings and being involved in it has changed his life. And he's so optimistic at the end, and at the beginning he was pretty down. So